It started with a plastic grocery bag. Yeah, one of those thin, crinkly ones you get from a corner store, the kind that looks harmless until you see what's inside. I was out back, watering my tomatoes, just minding my business on a quiet Sunday morning, when I heard my name get called. Sharp, tense, not friendly at all. I looked up, and there she was, not Linda this time. Let's call her Carla, standing stiff by the fence line between our yards, gripping that bag like it owed her money. "Explain this," she said. No hello, no build-up, just straight accusation. And I remember thinking, okay, what now? Because when someone skips the small talk and jumps straight into confrontation, you already know you're not walking away from that conversation clean. I walked closer, wiped my hands on my jeans, and that's when I saw it. Inside the bag, small, fragile bodies. Birds. At least 5, maybe 6. Feathers matted. Tiny claws curled up like they froze mid-grasp. "You need to stop poisoning your yard," Carla snapped, shaking the bag slightly like she wanted me to feel every ounce of it. This is the 3rd time. And I just stood there, blinking at her like she had completely lost the plot. "Carla, I don't use poison," I said, slow, confused, trying to keep my voice level because escalating early never helps. "My garden's organic. I don't even use chemical fertilizer. Now here's the thing. I take that seriously. I grow my own food. I compost. I read labels like they're bedtime stories. If anything, my yard's probably safer than most grocery store produce aisles." But she wasn't hearing it. "Then explain why I keep finding dead birds along our fence," she fired back, her voice cracking just slightly. Not just anger, there was fear in there too. "My kids play right there." That part, that stuck with me. Because suddenly it wasn't just about birds, it was about safety, her kids, her yard, something unseen creeping into a space that's supposed to feel controlled. And here's where things got uncomfortable. Because I had seen birds too. A couple weeks back, 3 sparrows near my window. I figured they flew into the glass. Happens more than people think. Then last week, for more. Same area. Same stretch near the fence. At the time, I brushed it off. Coincidence, bad luck, maybe migration patterns, or whatever explanation people use when they don't want to dig deeper. But standing there, looking into that bag, it didn't feel random anymore. It felt targeted. "Show me where you found them," I said, already pulling my phone out like somehow documenting it would make it make sense. Carla hesitated for a second, like she wasn't sure if she trusted me, then nodded and led me over to her side of the fence. And I swear, the second I stepped over there, something felt off. You ever walk into a place and your brain clocks something before you consciously process it? That was me. The grass wasn't right. There were these small, irregular patches, brown, brittle, like something had burned through the roots from the inside out. Not drought, not neglect. This was surgical. I crouched down, touched one of the spots, and immediately felt it. A tacky residue clinging to my fingertips. And then the smell hit. Sharp. Chemical. The kind of smell that doesn't belong anywhere near a backyard where kids run around barefoot. I rubbed my fingers together, frowning. "This isn't from my garden," I said quietly. "Someone's been spraying something here." Carla's face changed, anger drained out, replaced with something colder. Realization. "Why would anyone do that?" she whispered. And that's the moment it clicked for both of us. This wasn't accidental, and it definitely wasn't natural. Someone had been coming here. Repeatedly. Deliberately. Same spot. Same outcome. Dead birds. We both turned and looked at the fence, not just as a boundary, but as a target line. And once you see something like that, you can't unsee it. I pulled out my phone and called non-emergency police. Because yeah, I wasn't about to play detective on something that smelled like industrial chemicals. Carla gathered her kids and rushed them inside. And I don't blame her. When something invisible starts affecting your environment, your instinct is to contain it. About 30 minutes later, an officer showed up, Officer Reyes. Calm, observant, the kind of presence that doesn't overreact, but definitely doesn't miss details either. She walked the area slowly, took samples of soil and grass, barely said anything for the first few minutes, just watching, analyzing. Then she stopped, right at the fence line. "Come here," she said, motioning us over. Between 2 wooden boards, there was a narrow gap, maybe an inch wide, just enough for someone to slip something through. And the wood around it was stained. Slight discoloration, like repeated exposure to chemicals had soaked into the grain. There were scrape marks too, fresh ones, like someone had pried the boards apart more than once. Officer Reyes leaned in, inspecting it closely, then straightened up. "This isn't accidental," she said. "This is deliberate application." And just like that, the situation shifted. Because now it wasn't a maybe. It wasn't a misunderstanding between neighbors. It was someone out there choosing this exact spot over and over again, reaching through that gap and poisoning both sides of the fence. And I don't know how to explain it, but in that moment, the backyard didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt exposed, like someone had been standing just on the other side, watching, waiting, calculating. Officer Reyes glanced toward the tree line behind our properties, a dense stretch of woods most of us barely paid attention to. "Whoever's doing this," she said, "they're coming from back there." And yeah, that's when the chill hit. Because suddenly this wasn't just about dead birds. It was about someone who knew exactly where to go, exactly when to come, and exactly how to stay unseen. Now, let me pause the story for a second, because this is the part most people completely underestimate. And honestly, it's where things go from weird neighbor drama to this could ruin your life if you handle it wrong. According to standard procedure, when you're dealing with something like this, unknown chemicals, dead wildlife, repeated exposure, the situation automatically moves out of civil disagreement territory and into potential criminal liability. Not HOA complaint level, not let's file a noise report. We're talking environmental hazard, reckless endangerment, possibly even intent if there's a pattern, which, in our case, there clearly was. From a legal perspective, the moment a substance crosses property lines and causes harm, whether it's animals, plants, or even potential risk to children, that's no longer just someone treating their yard. That's contamination. And contamination comes with consequences. You don't need to prove motive right away, just the pattern and the impact. And we already had both. But here's where it gets even more interesting. This is a psychological trap a lot of people fall into. When something feels personal, but you don't have proof yet, you hesitate. You second-guess yourself. You don't want to accuse the wrong person, so you stall, and that hesitation? That's exactly what allows behavior like this to escalate. Because whoever was doing this wasn't experimenting. They were refining. Same time, same location, same method. That's not random. That's controlled behavior. And once you recognize that pattern, you stop asking what happened and start asking who benefits from this. That question is where everything starts to unravel. So yeah, once Officer Reyes said that out loud, everything changed. The backyard didn't feel like a backyard anymore. It felt like a scene, like something had been happening there long before we noticed, and we were just late to it. Carla stood next to me, arms crossed tight, eyes locked on that gap in the fence like it might move if she looked away. I kept thinking about what the officer said, pattern, deliberate, repeated, and it started connecting dots in a way I honestly didn't want it to. "Do either of you have cameras?" Reyes asked, already scanning the perimeter again. I shook my head. Never felt the need. Quiet neighborhood. You know how that goes. Carla hesitated for a second, then nodded. "We installed one last month. Backyard view." And that right there, that small decision she made weeks earlier without thinking much of it, ended up being the thing that broke the whole situation wide open. We went inside her house, and I remember the shift immediately. Outside felt exposed, but inside, it felt tense. Like we were about to confirm something neither of us wanted to be true. Carla pulled up the footage, scrolling through timestamps, fast-forwarding through hours of nothing, wind, shadows, the occasional raccoon doing its thing, until she stopped. Saturday night, 11:47 p.m. "Wait," she said, her voice dropping. "Go back." She scrubbed the video a few seconds earlier, and there it was. A figure emerging from the tree line. Not running, not sneaking in a panic, just walking. Calm, direct, like they'd done this before, like they knew exactly where they were going. We both leaned closer to the screen. The person walked straight up to the fence, paused for half a second, then reached forward. You could see the arm extend through that exact gap Officer Reyes pointed out. Then the motion, repetitive, controlled, spraying. Not once, not quick, several seconds, maybe longer. My stomach dropped, because that wasn't random. That wasn't someone testing something. That was someone executing a routine. "Zoom in," I said, barely above a whisper. Carla clicked, enhanced what she could. And yeah, that's when everything went cold. It was Derek, 2 houses down, Same guy who used to wave when we moved in. Same guy who offered to help with yard stuff that one time out of nowhere. Same guy who, a few months back, asked me out in that awkward, too intense way that immediately fell off. And when I said no, politely, clearly, he didn't take it well. Actually, that's putting it lightly. You'll regret acting like that, he told me back then. Not yelling. Worse, quiet, controlled, like he meant it. At the time, I brushed it off. People say weird things when they're rejected. You don't escalate unless they give you a reason to. But now, watching that footage, that wasn't a guy who said something weird. That was a guy who followed through. Carla covered her mouth. Are you serious right now? I couldn't even answer. Because suddenly, all those little things I ignored started lining up like they'd been waiting for this moment. The night my garden hose was sliced, clean cut, not an accident. The time my pepper plants were trampled, but nothing else touched. The feeling, subtle, easy to dismiss, that someone had been paying a little too much attention to my routine. He's been escalating, I said, more to myself than anyone else. And he's doing this where my kids play, Carla added, her voice shaking now, not angry, afraid. And that's the part that hits different. When something crosses from personal to dangerous, when it's no longer just about you, that's when the situation stops being complicated and starts being very, very clear. We called Officer Reyes back in immediately. She came over, reviewed the footage, didn't say much at first, just watched it twice, then once more. That's enough, she said finally. No drama, no speculation, just certainty. From there, everything moved fast. And I mean fast in that way where you realize the system does work, but only once you've handed it something undeniable. They went to Derek's house that same night. And here's the thing, people like that, they don't think they'll get caught. Not really. Because what they're doing lives in that gray zone for a while, subtle, deniable, easy to dismiss, until suddenly it's not. They found everything. In his garage, bottles of commercial-grade pesticide. Not the kind you casually pick up for your lawn. I'm talking industrial labels, hazard warnings all over them. Gloves stained. Equipment organized. And then, the part that honestly bothered me more than anything else. A notebook. Not messy. Not random. Structured. Dates. Times. Observations. My schedule. When I was outside. What I planted. When I watered. When I had people over. When I didn't. Carla read one line out loud later. Because yeah, they showed us parts of it after. Increased dosage so she notices this time. And I remember just sitting there thinking, this wasn't anger. Not really. This was control. This was someone who didn't like being told no, and decided to rewrite the situation in a way where he felt powerful again. Slowly, methodically. And that's what makes it dangerous. Not the outburst, not the yelling, but the patience. Derek was arrested that night. No resistance, no big scene. Just quiet compliance, which somehow made it worse. Like he didn't even see himself as the problem. The charges stacked up quickly: reckless endangerment, animal cruelty, trespassing, stalking. And once everything was laid out, there wasn't much room to argue. He pled guilty. 3 years. And yeah, some people hear that and think, only 3? But honestly, it wasn't just about the time. It was about the record, the acknowledgement, the fact that what he did wasn't brushed off as weird behavior or neighbor dispute. It was recognized for what it was. After that, things changed. Carla and I installed cameras, multiple angles, motion sensors, lights that turn night into daylight the second something moves. Other neighbors got involved too once they heard what happened. Funny how fast people pay attention when something crosses a line like that. The dead bird stopped. Completely. Not one after his arrest. The grass along the fence. Took a while, but it came back. My garden recovered. Slow at first, then all at once, like it had just been waiting for the threat to disappear. And Carla's kids, they went back to playing outside. That normal, loud, careless kind of playing that tells you everything's okay again. But here's the part nobody really talks about. Even when things go back to normal, they're not the same. Because now you know. You know how quiet something like that can be, how long it can go unnoticed, how close it can get before you realize what's happening. And once you've seen that, you don't unsee it. So, here's the part where I'd love to tell you everything just went back to normal, and we all moved on like nothing happened. But that's not really how it works. Not mentally, not emotionally, and definitely not when something like this messes with your sense of safety. Because the truth is, what Derek did didn't just damage a patch of grass or kill a few birds. It rewired how I look at people, at neighborhoods, at that whole idea of safe distance we think a fence gives us. And yeah, I know that sounds dramatic, but if you've ever had someone quietly cross boundaries over and over again, you get it. It's not the big explosive moments that stay with you. It's the subtle ones. The ones you almost ignored. The ones you explained away because you didn't want to believe someone would actually go that far. The lesson here is, most problems don't start as emergencies. They start as small discomforts. A weird comment. A look that lingers too long. A joke that doesn't land right. And we brush it off because we don't want to be the person who overreacts. But here's the flip side of that. Sometimes underreacting is exactly what allows things to grow into something worse. This is a psychological trap a lot of people fall into. We prioritize being polite over being safe. We don't want to accuse, we don't want conflict, we don't want to make it a thing, so we wait. And while we're waiting, someone else is testing limits. And I'm not saying you need to turn into a paranoid surveillance expert overnight, but awareness? That's not paranoia. That's just paying attention to patterns. Because think about it. Derek didn't wake up one day and decide to poison a yard. That behavior built up. It escalated. There were signals along the way, ones I noticed but didn't act on, because individually, they didn't seem like enough. From a legal perspective, what saved us in this situation wasn't luck, it was documentation. The camera footage, the physical evidence, the pattern. Without that, this could have easily turned into a he said, she said situation, and those rarely go anywhere. So if there's one practical takeaway here, it's this. Don't wait until something becomes undeniable before you start paying attention. Document early, even if it feels small, even if you're not sure it matters yet. Because patterns are built from small things repeated over time. According to standard procedure, once you have a pattern, everything changes. It gives law enforcement something concrete. It shifts the situation from opinion to evidence. And evidence? That's what actually protects you. And let's talk about something else people don't like to admit. Rejection, boundaries, and control. Because at the core of this whole situation wasn't just anger. It was entitlement. Derek didn't just not like being told no. He saw it as something that needed to be corrected. This is a psychological trap on the other side. The idea that persistence equals justification. That if someone keeps pushing, eventually they'll get what they want, or at least regain control in some way. But when that mindset mixes with resentment, that's when it turns dangerous. Not loud dangerous, quiet dangerous. The kind that plans, the kind that waits, the kind that escalates without announcing itself. And that's why boundaries matter more than people think. Not just setting them, but reinforcing them. Clearly, consistently, early. Because once someone starts testing them, silence doesn't de-escalate the situation. It often does the opposite. Now, I also want to touch on the neighbor aspect of this. Because yeah, HOAs, community rules, shared spaces, they're not always fun to deal with. But situations like this is exactly why they exist. In most neighborhoods, there are clear guidelines about chemical use, environmental safety, and actions that affect adjacent properties. And while people love to joke about HOA rules being overly strict, those frameworks can actually become a layer of protection when something crosses the line. Not perfect, not always enforced well, but they create a paper trail. And in situations like this, paper trails matter. The lesson here is community awareness is not the same as community drama. There's a difference between being nosy and being informed. And when something feels off, not just inconvenient, but genuinely off, it's worth paying attention to. And finally, trust your instincts. I know that sounds cliche, but there's a reason it keeps coming up. Because most of the time, your brain notices patterns before you consciously accept them. That feeling I had stepping into Carla's yard, that something wasn't right. I didn't have proof yet, but I had awareness. And awareness is where every solution starts. So yeah, if you take anything from this story, let it be this. Pay attention to patterns, document early, don't ignore escalation, and don't let politeness override your safety. Because sometimes the biggest threats aren't obvious. Sometimes they live 2 houses down. Smile when you walk by, and wait until you're not looking. Now I'm curious, what would you have done in this situation? Would you have confronted him earlier, or would you have waited for proof like we did? Let me know in the comments, because honestly, I still think about that part more than anything else.